Final Fantasy XI has had an amazing 15+ year run so far, bringing 22 of the series' most beloved classes to life in a way that only an MMORPG truly can. But over countless expansions, updates, and hell, game-breaking bugs, all of these jobs have changed in one way or another. And with those changes comes balancing patches, buffs, and the inevitable nerf bat. To celebrate the insanity of some of these changes, I'm going to go down my list of most altered jobs in Final Fantasy XI since it began, from day 1 straight through level 99. So let's get right into it. If you haven't already, definitely check out the 2 videos of my top 5 best and top 5 worst jobs in Final Fantasy XI, because the hilarious and passionate discussion that they spawned made me realize how much I really needed this video. Special thanks to Spoonman Abrams X for throwing out the idea, but enough rambling, let's get right down the list with number 5. Summoner. So a bunch of you were upset that Summoner wasn't on my top 5 worst jobs list, and I can't say that I blame you. There's a solid chance that I might have been touched with a little bit too much nostalgic love for my first 75 job and wasn't thinking 100% clearly. But regardless, it's had its fair share of changes over the years. Let's start with the obvious. When it first came out, the avatars were only really available to someone who could fight them at 65+. The solo fights didn't come till later, meaning for many attempting to play the job, it was just Carbuncle and some spirits. Let me just say that is a bad time. You are not a valuable contribution to the party when you only have Carbuncle and the spirits. Then for a while it was the core group of Shiva, Ifrit, Garuda, a solid bunch of avatars. Now we're at least getting some useful blood packs with Erzin Warren from Titan, Hastega, Double Slap, but the job still isn't at a point that it can complete with black mages for damage or white mages for healing, with, no actual healing spells of its own. So Square Enix kept slowly trying to improve it. Bring on Fenrir. This puppy introduced some crazy blood packs that improved accuracy and just straight up stab bonuses with Ecliptic Howl and Growl. Unfortunately, he was a little reliant on the phase of the moon, meaning he was just kind of mostly good. While Fenrir brought Summoner into the realm of, okay, at least you have Fenrir, in terms of parties, it still wasn't at the top of anyone's invite list. This same update also introduced Diablos, improving their already solid H&M and Godfight value with a static damaged ranged attack. So that was kind of cool. So we've continued the steadily upward trend to improve Summoner, but the last of the notably big changes to come in the 75 era was the splitting of offensive and defensive blood packs. While incredible, it did come with the downside of destroying your MP pool if you couldn't refresh fast enough, and was still limited to, obviously, the blood packs at Summoner's disposal. A big deal, but not enough to truly break the job of its stigmas. And while finally adding in Odin and Alexander for some truly nostalgic inducing 2-hour explosions of power, that was essentially the crescendo of Square Enix's changes somewhere in the 75 period, and there wasn't much hope beyond that. Look, I loved Summoner. I loved the hate-free damage it could dish out. I loved the lore, and I loved the badass avatars. And I don't care what you say, Blue Mages, having to face down the avatars alone in the level 20 avatar battles, some of the fiercest boss battles I've ever experienced, with nothing but my little Carbuncle, is one of the coolest ways I've ever learned spells in any MMO ever. I don't care that you had to fight a bee 100 times to learn Pollen. Not as cool. But Square Enix just didn't seem to know how to make it work without breaking the game. How do you make it as strong as a black mage, buff as well as a bard, or do skill chains as well as any melee, but not have it totally break everything around it? I mean, the avatars were free hate. They could take damage and then just disappear. If they went down, they went down. The Summoner's still out there ready to pull out a new one. It was great. And I always accepted that the unique nature of the job meant that, I'd have to make sacrifices in terms of viability everywhere else. And that was cool, because I still managed to do cool stuff. I managed to pull in a merit party with Carbuncle for chain 200s. I mean, a Carbuncle puller, like what is that? I held onto the tense fabric of my being while Hayden logged in as I kited Krutset in one of the most harrowing 5-minute solos of my career. I enjoyed immediate access to Skylink shells just for my ability to throw Leviathan at an enemy over and over and over again. Thank God for spinning dive. Of course, somewhere along the line towards 99, Square Enix forgot about the ideas of balance, and free hate, and damage limiting, and just made Summoner the ridiculously overpowered job it is in most games. At 99 now, even my crappily geared Summoner has every avatar out for free, can bust out 30k wind blades when the stars are aligned, and do it all without any fear of hate coming to me. A bunch of Summoners isn't just a good strategy now, it's a destructive force of nature. So when I say that Summoner is the 5th most changed job in Final Fantasy XI's long tenure, I don't just mean subtle shifts to how the abilities work, strengths of spells, or new subjob options becoming viable. I mean that core aspects of what the job can deliver have changed many, many times over the countless expansions and updates, and they've just continued to push Summoner further from the bowels of uselessness to almost godlike status that it frankly deserved from day one. Long live the Summoner, long live the Carbuncle. So how is that number 5, you ask? Well, despite the ridiculous amount of changes, for the most part it was kind of a steady upward climb. At least Summoners never had to worry about getting any worse, because they were already kind of at the bottom of the pile. And so it was for the next job on our list, Blue Mage. Blue was one of the top jobs that everyone complained wasn't on the top 5 best, because it is a seriously flexible powerhouse now at 99. But that list was meant to encompass all eras of the game, and either we're remembering different times or I was severely screwed by the blues I got to see in action at 75. Square Enix loved to toy with blues. Blue mages were finally the opportunity to take all those abilities that had destroyed us as players for years and fling them right back in the enemy's face. Moves like Thousand Needles, Bomb Toss, Self-Destruct, party wiping moves, and Square Enix provided them. Of course, all the ones you'd think would be incredible generally sucked. Thousand Needles was practically ancient magic in its cast time and MP cost. Bomb Toss was apparently more like a firecracker toss in the hands of an actual player, and Self-Destruct seems to focus mostly on the self and less of the actual destruction. But that's a little off topic. Why has it changed so much? Well, apart from its dramatic shift from the it's a decent melee caster to what role do you need it to be best at 99, it has literally received so many new spells and opportunities I don't even know where to start. Maybe the opportunity was there at 75, we just didn't know how to really take advantage as like a full party. Maybe it was players' refusal to shift age-old tactics and try new things. But when I think of blues at 75, I think mostly of defense gear setups for cannonballs and a lot of complaining that people were interrupting their self-skill chains. It was a sweet job, but it came out during the era of Honor Gone, and it was a constant struggle to keep that MP up. A lot of the better spells at the time were just expensive enough to keep you wishing you could self-refresh, and most of them were multi-hit, making it less than ideal for harder endgame content. It has some cool, unique utility spells, but for the most part, the job was just sort of there. Now again, I know a lot of you that played Blue Mage at 75 are probably thinking that I'm crazy and I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But Blue was one of those jobs that added complications to a party. Not only did it need accuracy, attack, strength, all the things that a melee would need, but it also needed things like refresh and magic accuracy and ballads and stuff. And it was just hard to balance that in traditional setups, and whenever you add those complications, people tended to avoid it for difficult content. So Square Enix kept just kind of saying, well, let's just keep tweaking it. Every expansion, DLC, level cap raise that introduced new enemies or opportunities for spells, they added more for Blue. A new stun and sudden lunge, some new multi-hit and single target attacks, better traits to be gained from different spell combos. I mean, the list just kind of kept growing. Some jobs would occasionally get something along the lines of a single new spell or one new ability. Blue would get like 15 at a time. There's something like 200 spells now. That's just stupid. On top of that, they really did do an amazing job of just making them better and better. Blue already have one of those solo haste spells? Let's give it a better one. Stone Skin not doing the concept justice? How about we make it AoE? Sleep taking too long to cast? We'll just throw like 4 more versions of Sleep in there and let them pick. SE didn't improve anything, they just slowly added more, until everything that could be considered weak had a better version available. At this point at 99, Blue can be an effective source of magic damage, healing, melee damage, skill chain damage, tanking, support. It's just absurd. The limits of what it's capable of are almost purely an imagination of the player at this point. And Cocoon may be the only spell in my repertoire that I think remains from the 75 era. It's an incredible shift from rags to riches, and I haven't even mentioned Mighty Guard yet, which I think frankly just breaks the game. Regardless of how you felt about the job at 75, it's tough to ignore the fact that it has just fundamentally been altered consistently over and over again since it was first introduced. And unlike subtle balance changes, they've been mostly overt, obvious new spells that just straight up changed everything about the options available to you. I mean, Blue is a ranged spell now that seems to do a standard of about 1k damage for like 8 MP. What even is that? But this is still, for the most part, a one-way street, onwards and upwards, with more spells, abilities, more opportunities to take the job to new heights. By number 3, we finally encounter one of the more devastating tracks, the downward spiral, with Ranger. Ranger always felt at least sort of okay to me because they paid for their success. I remember when I first started and began to understand how expensive the world of Vana'diel could be, the shock when I saw that Ranger had to pay for ammunition, just literally throwing gil away. And the good stuff, it was like a lot of gil. It wasn't just a little gil, it was a lot. That's just ridiculous. Which of course meant that I had almost zero interest in the job, because money wasn't exactly one of my strong suits. I'd like to think I found the occasional financial loophole over the years, getting a little money-making niche that would last for a short time, but I was just not an effective businessman by any means, and I was always scrounging for cash. Bringing us back to Ranger. In the early days of Final Fantasy XI, range attack, accuracy, and overall damage was the same no matter where you stood. As long as you could hit them, it counted, which is a little backwards in terms of physics, but hey, it's a video game. This meant that a ranger could be right up in whatever's face, smacking those crabs with a sword, axe, whatever would get the most TP. while firing off the occasional barrage of an arrow, of course, and then just unloading with a weapon skill powered by the far stronger bow, like Sidewinder. Basically, every other job couldn't have it both ways. If you had a weapon that would hit fast but for low damage, your weapon skills would suffer as a result. With Ranger, you could gain TP with whatever weapon you wanted, and you could grab the highest delay bow in existence and literally blow holes in things. Other jobs like Sam subbing Ranger could take advantage of this in different ways, but Ranger was the first. Did I mention that they're ranged attackers too, with wide scan? I mean, these guys are natural born pullers that can stay out of reach of AoEs if they have to in fights. Oh, and they're 2 hours an immediate and deadly single attack. I mean, come on, Rangers were just really strong for missions and endgame, and above all parties, and like I said, I was okay with that because they paid for it, for the most part. But eventually Square Enix saw this and said, nay, this is not as it should be, and first introduced me to the concept of the Nerf Bat. They changed ranged attacks so they couldn't stand right next to an enemy or suffer an accuracy and attack penalty, and damage was now affected by the enemy's level in relation to your own. I read through some of the raging posts from 2005 about this change, and you can still feel the pain. Not everyone wanted to play this new Ranger that could build up TP with a melee weapon, slamming a ranged attack macro over and over and over again to get through each fight. But more importantly, this made them a truly ranged fighter, and for once they felt the pain of all the odd jobs. Ranger doesn't benefit from haste the same way melee jobs do, so once it was in the backlines, it wasn't getting the same barred benefits it did before. Now in a video about altering jobs, you might think that more and more changes continue to rack poor Ranger, but that really isn't the case. Ultimately, Final Fantasy XI itself just continued to change, molding into something that Ranger wasn't necessarily bad for, but just wasn't as explosively useful as it once was. To a job that was once on the top of the pile, this was devastating. Now I missed a couple of the 99 years, but apparently there was a time where Ranger went back up to King of the Hill, and then went back down again. But ultimately it seems to come back to that first change. Ranger suffers the same problem as Pup and Blue that I was just talking about. It's just that it doesn't necessarily play well with others. It's still incredibly strong, but it's not as easy to work into the flow as 2 melees, or all magic, or all pets, or a mix of melee and magic. Ranger's out there putting up big numbers, but you have to work your setup around the Ranger. It's not quite as one size fits all. I said this a million times in my top 5 best worst videos, and I'll say it again. One of my favorite aspects of Final Fantasy XI is its flexibility and player ability to approach situations in any way they see fit with any jobs they want to use. Unfortunately, player stigma will cause more of an issue than anything, and no job has ever fallen quite as far as Ranger did. Still an awesome job though, and I'd love to try it for myself to get a full feel for what it plays like now in 99, but I still just can't imagine paying for all that ammo. So okay, we've seen worst to best and best to worst, but what about all the in-between? Bringing us to number 2, Dragoon. Dragoon in the time before I played was a powerhouse, a god amongst men, firing off pentahrusts every 2 seconds. TP returns for multi-hit weapon skills could provide full TP for each hit, giving Dragoons a serious advantage with their 5-hit pentathrusts. They'd be like halfway to their next pentathrust every time they used it. As time went on, the great Enix saw this as an imbalance and brought multi-hit down closer to single hit, with each additional hit only doing 1 TP instead of a full hit. At this point, it became painfully obvious that Dragoon was kind of in a weird place. We've gone over that the 2-hour made things a little difficult for Dragoon because the Wyvern was a core aspect of the damage Dragoon could do. If a rogue, poison, or too many AoEs brought it down, that was a significant decrease in damage output for up to 2 whole hours. Of course, that wasn't the only place Dragoon was a little lackluster. Gear options were limited for Dragoon in comparison to the rest of the crowd. No Harb Urgent for Dragoon, although I bet a few jobs wish they had those spiked gauntlets. They were pretty sweet. But especially in terms of an average player, it was just a lot easier to gear up some of the other options than it was to gear up Dragoon. And to make things worse, weapon skills didn't really pick up until those Nizal Isle options, or Relic. Once traditional parties went out of style, Wheeling Thrust just wasn't quite as useful for pure damage. It was always great because it could open up a light skill chain. Impulse Drive and Skewer are okay, but I mean, Pentathrust was like a level 50 weapon skill, it just wasn't that great by 75. All Dragoon may have a different source than I remember, but it was no joke. For a while, Dragoon was just sort of around. It wasn't the worst job ever, it wasn't the best, definitely wasn't the easiest to gear up. Add into that around this time Ninja Sub was all the rage, and Dragoon really couldn't benefit from it, so you see the issues. So this is Dragoon's low point. Of course, then along comes Ottergon and changes to Hasso and Saigon. Suddenly birds are all the rage, super weak to Dragoon's Piercy McPiercerson ways. And even though it's not quite Ninja Sub, two-handers are getting a boost from Samurai Sub with Meditates, Hasso, and Saigon for a little defensive edge. Didn't even the scales, but it certainly balanced them a little bit, and Dragoon was solid again. Dragoon at this point had always been valuable for certain endgame content. The Wyvern broke a few rules in terms of how damage worked, and between jumps and meditates, the Dragoon could fire off a weapon skill pretty early on in a fight. Then of course they could super jump away to safety, allowing for relatively safe damage output in missions and endgame. Somewhere around this, SE did a famous boo-boo though, and straight up broke two-handers. I forget exactly what happened, but some damage calculation no longer worked correctly, and my Dragoon was throwing out 2 to 3k pentathrusts on birds. I think it had something to do with strength. Strength was like maxing out. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was a beautiful few days of partying before they fixed it. Which, of course, they did, like, immediately. This is the high point of my Dragoon career. I never quite felt better. Oh, and they fixed the Wyverns. Made it a 20-minute ability and gave Dragoon a new 2-hour at some point. When did that happen? I really wish I could remember this timeline better. It's all kind of screwed up in my mind. Anyways, flash forward and Dragoon remained largely the same. As the 99 world evolved, it stabled out as a solid TP building job with some better weapon skills than it used to have. Another Wyvern update gave Dragoon another strength boost dependent on small fry kills to level up the Wyvern. It was a crazy boost to Dragoon's damage output, but sort of a wow that's a little late kind of update in 2014. It suffered with the rest of the melee during the magic only phase at 119, when everything's evasion was so jacked up that you really couldn't hit it. But it's since come back as a great option for fast continuous skill chains with a melee focused party. Long story short, and I don't think I'm doing it justice, it just sort of bounced around, and not just through the years but through the levels. Sometimes it would feel kind of like a king with higher accuracy than other options and temporarily stronger weapon skills, and then it would fall off again and be left behind, forever the lol Dragoon. Square never really gave up on it though, which if nothing else says something about their commitment to the job. Long live the Wyvern and long live the Dragoon. Jumps for days, guys. Of course, regardless of how many times it swung back and forth on the pendulum, Dragoon cannot match the intensity of our next job's shift. Scholar. A lot of people complained very loudly and without empathy or remorse about how stupid I was to not have Scholar on my top 5 jobs list of all time, and especially about how it probably should have been number 1. To those people, I say, yeah, I guess. But seriously, do you remember 75? When it first came out, Vanadil stood still, a new option outside of Refresh, strange abilities that maxed out your magic skill at a B rating, regardless of whether you had it natively or not. A job that could switch between strong black or white magic at will and on the fly, manipulating those spells with abilities that increased potency, decreased cost, or made them just straight up hit multiple targets. I'm getting all frothy just thinking about it. But then it arrived on the scene, and in an expansion that introduced Dancer no less, and it was just kind of underwhelming. Now don't get me wrong, I thought it was super cool, but this was still Merit Burn era, with Calibris reflecting magic all over the place. No one wanted to level setting up skill chains and magic bursts anymore, as sad as that was, and Dancer had only made it worse. So in parties, Scholar was delegated mostly to healing work, and that's just kind of a bummer. Endgame wise, it didn't have the raw magical damage output of Black Mage, lacking the tier 5 spells, and its big deal was the Helix spells. While they're really sweet for some tough fights, damage over time options, they were mostly relegated to single boss enemies, which is fine, just wasn't something that was easily applicable to all scenarios. Look, it was fine, it was okay, but that's not why it's on this list. This list isn't supposed to be about whether the jobs are good or bad, but how they've shifted over the years. And man, did Scholar shift. Because at some point it went from, I guess it's okay, to screw any other job in this game, Scholar is all you need. I swear, somebody lost a bet at Square Enix, because on the road to 99 and beyond, Scholar learned how to self-skill chain, magic burst off of that, and basically say, screw all y'all, I don't need nobody. Having a job that's crazy at soloing is nothing new. Having a job that's good at doing that as a mage is something special. But what's worse is everything about what makes Scholar a great soloer now makes them useful for parties as well. Those skill chains are great for setting up a ton of black mages, already have skill chains, put all those extra points into enhanced damage for bursting. It's just a strong job. And like Blue, it's flexible to a variety of needs and situations, although it can switch between those a hell of a lot faster. Maybe I screwed up the intent of my own video, because realistically Scholar wasn't altered that much after its initial release, but its shortcomings were just slowly removed on the road to 99, evening out its comparisons to white mages and black mages, while offering unique utility and options that only Scholar could provide. The biggest of which was obviously the solo skill chain through stratagems. This is also serving as a late apology for not including this in a top 5 best jobs video, but I still truly believe that it didn't belong there. Mostly because I was thinking a lot about the 75 era. I was so excited for Scholar when it came out, and it ended up just not really matching my expectations. I still think it's an amazing job, but it wasn't the end-all be-all thing that it is now at 99. But I've also learned my lesson from the top 5 worst video, so here are some of the runners-up that just barely almost didn't make it onto this list. Starting with Monk. Poor Monk went from a badass pre-auto gun to still pretty solid and just sort of winded down from there. The 99 era became all about skill chains and Monk just couldn't keep up. Pup had the automaton to help balance that out, but Monk just had its monkery. Honestly, the only reason I hadn't included it here, because despite Square Enix's attempts to change boost and kick attacks and everything else, at its core it still just feels like Monk. You're still just punching things in the face, laying down some Majoran fists. If anything, they just haven't been able to buff it to match the intensity all the other jobs have grown to. It's not that it's changed, it's really more that it hasn't. Ninja. Ninja was one of my top 5 greatest jobs of all time list, and not everyone agreed with that. It's hard to deny though that in the 99 day and age, it's just not the powerhouse it once was, because of other evasion nuts like Thief taking center stage, and shadow tanking not being as valuable with all the AoEs and tough magic damage getting thrown around now. Despite all that, it's mostly in how it's been used that the job has shifted. It stayed relatively the same, with Square Enix eventually just accepting that it was almost used exclusively as a tank, and providing the tools to make that a little more balanced. Pup was my #1 worst job of all time, and also one of my favorites. What can I say though, at 99, it's kind of a powerhouse. I saw Mama one-shot Eldnark's second form, and tank an NM that was taking down a well-geared paladin. But it's still freaking weird, and people have to be willing to work with you to bring out its best. And realistically, the only thing that's really changed has been the attachments that are available, and all they are stronger versions, more like Black Mage Tier 5 magic versus Tier 3 than they are like a new set of abilities. Also, in my mind, this was never making Pup like a different job than it was, but fixing the broken mess that they started with. Also Dark Knight had a bit of a Dragoon scenario, gaining in strength and popularity mostly depending on which way the winds were blowing that year. It fell on hard times when the merit burn phase began, but in my opinion not for a lack of strength, but more that stigma problem. Kaleri smacked them around with reflecting their magic, but between Drain 2, Drain TP, and Dread Spikes, which had recently been added, a really good Dark like my man Hayden could put up some insane merit burn numbers. Finally though, Red Mage. Only one reason. At one point Red Mage did not have the spell Refresh. I feel like that's really all that needs to be said about why it should have been on this video. Otherwise, it's basically the same concept as day 1. But seriously, there was a day where Red Mage was refreshless. Guys, that about sums this one up. Definitely leave in the comments your thoughts on the jobs I listed and any that deserve to be here. Realistically, Square Enix did spread the wealth pretty well over the years, so everyone's probably feeling like their job was changed the most. And hell, you might all be right. Otherwise, check back for more videos each week, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace. As always guys, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, you should totally think about subscribing. I've got videos coming out twice a week, and if you like this one, there's at least a chance you'll like some of the others that are very similar to this, so live dangerously. Let me know what you guys thought about the video in the comments, and other videos you'd like to see. And finally, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Huntin for Games to keep up with all the latest stuff. See ya!